Hello, it's Steve. Last time on this series, we moved our XML parsing over to our map loader and laid out the set of structs to store our sprite sheet and template data into. This time I'll work on creating loaders for that data and get the map data displaying in a more sane way. Yeah, whatever. To start with, let's just copy what we have up here for these other asset loaders. So this is going to be the sprite sheet loader. Let's rough in some basic returns so we can get these errors to go away to start with. Tile within columns is no problem, but the sprite needs to be a handle. So let's start by changing the name of the load context and using that .load. And then it's going to take some path, and that'll return a handle to an image. We're also going to change this file type to TSX. And let's do the same thing for the template loader. Same thing here, using the load context and vector new to rough in some default data. So that makes these two things happy. We also need to load in some default data in raw map data. For that, we're going to need our load context. Cool. Now let's go back to the well of parsing XML data, and I will be starting with the map data itself again. Now we're looping over every object in the object group element inside here, so we're looping through all of these. However, an interesting wrinkle with read-only XML tree is this children call will also grab not just every element inside, but also all the white space individually. So it'll get that first, and then this new line, and then the next one, so on and so forth. In order to skip those, we can check is element on this object element, and that'll handle that. And since we, in this case, we don't really care if we don't find any property elements underneath these objects, so I'm going to do an if let. This will discard the none case of this find operation. Based off of this object property implementation, when we new up an object property, we need to make sure each of these have values. And we don't really want to worry ourselves about that right now. So let's go up and implement a default trait for this object property to make this a little bit easier. Default is a default Rust trait that you can use this function to return what is default. And then what you can do with it is in here, you can add whatever you want. So for instance, the value B, we're going to parse that in a second. We also want the value type to be bool. And then we don't really care what the rest of these are, so we can do the default call here, which is really handy. Now let's parse this value real quick. So there's our bool. Let's do that for all the other types as well. And oh, actually, I don't want to expect here, because I happen to know that when the type of these properties is a string, then the type just doesn't even exist like that. Then this will be a string instead of a boolean. So instead of expecting this to have a value, let's not, and instead match on sums over here. If it's a none, then that'll be a string. So let's put a little comment there to remind us. And if it's any other value, this will happen if maybe we have a typo in these string matches, because I don't really know necessarily what color comes through as a value type, for instance. So this will let us know, hey, there's something that we need to parse. So instead of doing all of this, let's go ahead and do a to-do here and print line unsupported type val. Now let's go ahead and support the rest of the values that we need to use. So can actually check integer in here. So that's saying type int. So let's do that. What's this mad about? Ah, right. So we can't do string parse from a color to... Right now, I don't really expect to ever have color. So let's just return a default color for now. And we can figure out the rest later. If we ever need to support color, we can figure out what that gives us. It's probably a hex value if I had to guess. And we're getting a little complaint here that this needs to be mutable. All right, so we're supporting a bunch of different values. They're all parsing into different types. And I need to make sure that I assign to the correct value type for each of these. So float, int, sorry, this is a string. And also a nice little message to tell us that maybe we messed something up. After we've parsed all of these properties, we can push this into the objects array. And here's a little hiccup. We need to figure out how to load these templates based on a relative string. So we'll do that in a second. Let's just continue with these attributes first. We also need to grab the tile width from the document. And this needs to parse to a F64. And this needs to be mutable. Cool. So now we have all those objects. We don't need to new this up anymore. And the last thing to solve for the raw map data is figuring out the load context. And let's go ahead and snag Spritesheet data as well. All right, and the reason that we are getting a weird lifetime issue here is because instead of passing in this pointer to a string, we would really want to be passing in a string from, which just converts this into a string pointer, which is, I believe, ref counted or something else fancy that doesn't require that sort of lifetime management. However, this isn't really even what we want to do, because the game engine isn't going to know what to do with this path, this tile set source path. So if we look over here at the map, right, and look at the tile set, that's ... It's like up to and then sprites tsx. If we try to load that from our main file, that's going to go like up outside of our project and look for it out there. So what we need to do is turn this into a local path. And let's write a nice little function for that real quick. And by little, I mean kind of complicated, but whatever. For now, we'll put it down here. Let's draft up an example so that we have a North Star to follow. That's what we want out and in. So to start with, let's convert these into strings for easier mutability. And build a vector of the path parts to work with. First, let's remove the file name from the end of here. So this is the file name to the file that we're working with. We don't really need that file name. And I forgot to convert this path to a string as well. And let's build up our return value. So now we're iterating over this split string. And for every ... we want to go up a level. And then eventually we want to go into this file. So that's handling popping things off of this stack up to the, in this case, up to the res. This is how I'm detecting files. It's kind of a dumb way to detect files, but it works for our purposes. And if it's not a file, that means it's a subfolder, so we can include that plus the trailing slash because there's going to be more. And now let's prepend this return path with basically the res. Okay, so this is a handy dandy function. We can pass in our path that we find in the files as well as our path to the file itself, and we'll get back a relative path for our project itself. So here, let's do that, and let's do sprite sheet path. There we go, and our asset path from the load context. We can also use this same function again up here to load in the template file. So this, we're going to have to grab the path to the template from the object, which is just a property on the object element itself, as well as this same path from the load context. Map handled. This is a little long, but it's going to have to be for now. Next up, and significantly more straightforward, is the Spritesheet loader. Oh, actually, before we do that, let's move this down into its own section, just to keep things clean. All right, Spritesheet loader. This one's going to be pretty bog standard, so I'll kind of skim over it. And now we can use that tile width, use those columns, and do the same thing with source that we were doing above. And that's nothing really to talk about there. That's the Spritesheet loader. Next up, the template loader. We're going to have to grab the properties again from these templates. And this is going to be really similar logic to above. So let's break that out into its own function. So let's see here. I just want something that can give me, take in an object element and give me properties back. So let's copy this logic for now and make a helper function right here. Now, what are the issues here? Let's make sure we import node. Oh, we need to use XML tree node because node is a very generic name. And it looks like this will work just fine. So all the way up here, let's nuke all of these and replace them with called this. And there we go. No complaints from there. So let's move this function to the helpers section, and let's use get properties from object element right in here. So it can be properties or it can be object. I don't really care. Okay, cool. That'll work. So now properties can come from properties, sprite index can come from sprite index, and the sprite sheet needs to be loaded from this sprite sheet path. The file is happy. How about that? So that should be all of the parsing we need to do. Let's pop over to our main file and do some slightly better printing, because we love print statements here. It's what we're all about. Now we're loading in our set of image assets, template assets, and sprite sheet assets, as well as our raw map data assets. This is going to be adjusted in the next episode to make this less painful. We need to put a layer in between here and our map loader in order to load map data in a more sane way for ourselves. But until then, let's use this, which is going to try and grab our tutorial map and tell us we're loading. And if we are loaded, we'll continue on and grab the sprite sheet, and then the sprite, and then the template, and then we're going to log out some data based on our information of these parsed files. Let's see if it works. All right, look at that. So we have a bunch of data. It looks like our sprite height is 16, which makes sense. Our template sprite index that's just one of the sprite indexes of one of our templates. I'm not sure which template. I should probably have logged that out as well. But before that, let's go up to the top. And look at that, we loaded like immediately. It didn't even take any time to say anything's not loading. Now this isn't always going to happen, but cool. So next time, for sure this time, we will actually display some images, and that'll be nice. So check it out. Peace. Thanks for watching.